So hi everybody, today Khushi and I are going to be explaining various aspects of consumer protection law to you. Just to give you an introduction, we are both first year law students at Jindal Global Law School and we're both interns at Asha Infinite Foundation right now.
This presentation has been made by Out Loud India and we have worked with them for this to hold this webinar. All right. Before we start, one of the key words of this whole webinar is the word consumer. So what would you define a consumer as?
May I speak?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So in a general sense or in layman language, consumer is someone who purchases something or someone who is in the opposite of a person who's providing service.
That's layman and that's the legal definition, I would say. Section 2D of the Consumer Protection Act defines a consumer as a person who has paid or even partly paid for a good or a service. So what would you define a good or a service to be?
Let's say I'm going to purchase groceries at my near supermarket. So
perfect.
That's it.
Yeah, so that's basically it, guys. So a consumer is someone who pays or partially pays for any kind of good or service. Additionally, it's also including hiring of goods and services. So that comes under partial payment. Let's move on to the next one. Why do you think consumers would need protection? I mean, what do you need protection from?
Fraudulent, spurious goods, fraudulent service providers, cheating.
Precisely. Why do you think this is so important as consumers?
I wouldn't want my money to go waste, right?
Exactly. So the same thing has been repeated over here, exactly your point, just in this video. This video showed a bunch of people and a lot of different examples of consumers and different goods that they can consume. And the only people that get affected when there is a violation of consumer rights is us or the consumers, which is why consumer protection is important, which is why knowing how to protect yourself is also important. So please tell us a little about your experiences with consumerism. Do you have some experiences where you were not satisfied or where you felt your rights were violated or you were taken advantage of? Personally, I think we've all heard examples of Amazon disasters where people order apples and they get actual apples instead of phones and earpods and stuff like that. So I feel especially in the era of the pandemic, with e-commerce being on such popular websites and being such a popular thing, there's a lot more consumer violation that goes on.
Exactly. Like Khushi mentioned, because of e-commerce, a lot of these things are being exacerbated because like what you see is not what you get. At least, when you go to a shop, you see the product, like you basically see exactly what you're going to get. But in e-commerce, they might put a picture where it looks really nice. When you actually get it, it can be completely not like what they have mentioned it to be. Now, the next segment of this presentation will kind of go into specific areas in which consumer rights are often violated. And we're going to be picking up 4 of these instances, and we're also going to be talking about how these instances you can be protected against these kinds of things happening in your life through the Consumer Protection Act. So the first aspect that we are going to be talking about today is unfair contracts. But before we get into what an unfair contract is, we want to explain what a contract is, whether fair or unfair. So contract is basically an agreement, but it's a formal agreement. So it's between two or more people or parties. So not necessarily people, it can be between companies, associations, groups of people as well. And there are a couple of main characteristics of an agreement that makes it into a contract. So for example, both parties need to consent to it, which means that both parties need to basically agree that these are the terms of the contract. They need to also be majors, which means they both need to be over the age of 18 years old, and they need to be capable of making decisions at the time. They are based on an object that is in exchange for consideration. So for example, if I'm purchasing a bag of apples, the bag of apples will be the object. That's what the contract is centered around. And let's say I pay 10 rupees for those apples. So the 10 rupees that I'm paying would be the consideration. So basically, is a bill of sale or contract. So a bill can be a receipt of a contract because it evidences that you have purchased this. So it can be like proof that a contract did take place between you and the person who you are buying it. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Okay, because contracts can be verbal as
Yes.
well. So a bill can be like a proof that you had purchased it from that. So now before we go into what an unfair contract is, I'm giving this example to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me what the problem in this is, or if there's no problem, you can justify if you think that this is correct as well. You're trying to buy a laptop from an e-commerce website, and there's this clause in the terms and conditions that says, regardless at what point the laptop stops working, the consumer shall be entitled to only 5% of the total price as a refund, which basically means that even if you buy the laptop and 1 hour later, before you've even done anything on it, it stops working, you won't get a full refund. You'll only get 5% of what you originally paid. What's wrong or what's right in this clause? Basically, the problem with this clause is quite obvious in that you are getting you've paid a lot of money for a product, and you are neither getting a working product nor are you getting your entire money back, right? You're only getting 5% of the money that you originally paid, which is obviously putting you at a disadvantage. And in the case of e-commerce as well, this becomes even more exacerbated. So the reason that it becomes worse is because this is what is called a standard form of contract. So standard form of contracts are those contracts where the element of consent is not there, because it is a standard form of contract that the consumer has to sign or else they don't get the product. So if you don't agree with this terms and condition, you can't buy the laptop. You have two options. You buy the laptop with this unfair contract, or you don't buy the laptop at all. And the reason why this is an issue is because the consumer doesn't have enough bargaining power compared to the huge company. So basically, because it's very take it or leave it, that's also one aspect that makes it unfair. So our question to you is there anything in the Consumer Protection Act that can help you in this? Section 2, subsection 46 gives the definition for an unfair contract, like very broadly. So for example, it says having terms that cause changes in the rights of a consumer. And then they've given 6 subsections here. So now you guys tell us which of these subsections you think that this example with the computer would go under. So the first one is when you require a lot of excessive security deposit, when you are imposing a penalty on the consumer if they do not fulfill the contract, which is very disproportionate. So it's a lot more than what is required. It's a very harsh punishment considering what kind of a thing the consumer might do. When they refuse to accept early repayment of debt. So let's say you've taken it on a loan and you want to pay the loan early, and they're like, no, we'll wait for the date itself and you have to pay it then. So that's also an unfair contract. When you are entitling a party of the contract to terminate the contract unilaterally. That means when you're allowing that party to just terminate it from themselves. Let's say me and Khushi are in an agreement, and this contract gives Khushi the power to just at any time, even if I've already put in all the effort and put all of in power to send this good to her, she just terminates the contract, and then I have to take a lot of fees to get that thing back because it's in transit. So that's also an unfair contract. Then there's also allowing one party to assign the contract to the detriment of another party of the consumer without their consent. So this one party has set the contract without the consumer's consent, and they don't have an adequate amount of power to kind of fight back against that contract. And the last one is imposing on the consumer any unreasonable charge, obligation, or condition which puts these consumers to a disadvantage. So basically, you're putting this kind of condition on them, which is going against their rights and which puts them at a disadvantage compared to the other person who is selling the product. So these are the 6 kind of definitions that they've given for an unfair contract. The example we've just given you, which of these sections do you think that it goes underneath that?
Unreasonable charge.
That's definitely correct, because they're asking you basically to pay 95% of the price for a product that doesn't even work, and that definitely puts you to a disadvantage. So that's definitely correct. I guess you could also talk about the fifth clause, because you are again putting this, they're not giving the party an opportunity to kind of negotiate with you and say that, I want 100% refund. So I guess that could also be there. And one thing to note is that it's never just one issue, like in a consumer claim, you can always put multiple claims forward as well. So if this was to be a proper lawsuit, you could definitely put it under Section 5 and Section 6 both as well. So now we're going to talk about misleading advertisements. So before I go ahead, just put in the chat if any of you guys had Horlicks growing up, put yes or no. So this is an advertisement from Horlicks that you may or may not have seen, but we're just going to show it right now.
Rest, guys.
Extra time? नहीं चाहिए. Getting stronger. नहीं चाहिए और कुछ भी, सिर्फ Horlicks और हम.
Horlicks बनाए बच्चों को taller, stronger, sharper. अब प्रमाणित.
So does anybody know potentially what could be the issue in this kind of an ad?
Basically, it's misleading. I mean, it's obviously written there, but it makes a claim that it probably can't uphold or can't guarantee at least.
That's true. Which claim is that? So it's the claim that, Horlicks can make you taller, stronger, and sharper just by itself, like doing nothing else. Just by having Horlicks, you will become taller, stronger, and sharper. So yeah,
the last line of the ad is what was the worst part.
Yeah, they said it was like now proven, like implying that science has said that this will do it, do whatever you need to do it. So the question is here, is there anything that you can do? Is it just your fault that you believed and you fell for this advertising gimmick? Or is there anything that can be done to kind of protect the consumer in this situation? So could you go to the next slide? So again, we're giving you the act, and you have to point out to us which provision this would kind of go under. So a misleading advertisement is defined in basically three major ways. Firstly, when you're falsely describing a product, you're basically saying that it is a certain way, but it actually isn't. Second is when you give a false guarantee to, or you mislead the consumer in a certain way about what the product can do. And the last one is when you deliberately conceal important information about the product. So of these three major ones that I've bolded, which of these do you think that this ad goes under?
Falsely describes the product or service, right? And guarantees, rather.
Yeah, so both of those are correct. It is technically also falsely describing a product because you're describing it as, capable to make you taller, stronger, and sharper. And it's also misleading of giving a false guarantee that if you drink it, you will become taller, stronger, sharper. So again, you can make multiple claims under the act, and these two definitely does go underneath that. There's another example actually of, if you want to know actual example of when a case was filed. So I'm sure you've all heard of the drink Red Bull, right? And their signature tagline is Red Bull gives you wings. Now, obviously, we all know that if you're going to drink a drink, you're not going to suddenly get wings. But it's actually in 2014, somebody filed a lawsuit against Red Bull saying that I had Red Bull and I didn't get wings, and you're doing misleading advertisement. And guess what? They actually settled that thing. So they settled it from, if I'm remembering correctly, $13 million. So it did not go to court. So the court could not rule on whether this is actually misleading or not, but it cost the company millions to suggest that Red Bull actually gives you wings. So I also read this article suggesting that after that, they have changed it. So it's not Red Bull gives you wings, it's Red Bull gives you wings with 3 eyes. So if technically somebody brings up that claim in court that, oh, Red Bull hasn't given me wings, they can say that there's no such thing as wings with 3 eyes in the dictionary definition. So we didn't promise you anything. And it still sounds similar enough to wings that people will attribute it with their old slogan. So this is actually like misleading advertisements is no joke. People actually and companies actually lose a lot of money over it. Yeah, so now we're going to be talking about the other areas of misleading advertisement, specifically when you're falsely describing a product or when you're deliberately concealing important information. So falsely describing a product is literally exactly how it sounds. You're saying that the product is a certain way when it actually isn't. In this example, you can say that a person has bought this piece of furniture, this rug, and actually it's not the size of a rug at all, it's the size of a handkerchief. So here that product was falsely described because they're saying that it is a certain dimension, it is a certain size that you can put in your house, but clearly it's just the size of a handkerchief. So the next is deliberately concealing information. So we've all had Maggie. Maggie's like a staple of every single household. And we all know that a while ago it got banned for the accusation that it had lead in it. So, and lead is, for those of you who don't know, it's a metal and it's toxic when ingested beyond a certain level. So the fact that this information was concealed from all of us is another instance of deliberately concealing information.
Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of us know the meaning of liability. And liability is basically being held accountable and being held responsible for your own mistakes. So now if you look at the example over here, you have this guarantee, at least like 3 different types of Amazon guarantees can be seen over here. Amazon's choice, fulfilled by Amazon, etc. So what do you think this has? Basically, Amazon's choice, stuff like this, it sort of implies that Amazon itself or the platform where this product is being sold endorses the product to a certain degree. So it sort of guarantees that this product is going to be, up to a certain level. So now if you look at the next example, you place the example for this, and when you open the packaging, everything seems fine. But when you start using it, the MI sticker peels off and you suspect that it is fake. When you initiate an inquiry with Amazon, they claim that they are merely the platform or the intermediary, and the buyer and seller are the only ones who need to be involved in this. Who do you think would be held liable?
For liability, I think partly the seller and partly Amazon, because Amazon is where who we would have picked up, because Amazon said they endorse those people, right?
Exactly. Since they have basically endorsed it, they will also be held liable. So product liability basically claims means that the manufacturer or the platform will also be held liable, separate from the seller. So whatever they say about the product should be true, otherwise legal action can be initiated against them. So the product liability is now covers within its ambit the product manufacturer, the service provider, and the seller. Product seller has now been defined to include a person who is involved in placing the product for a commercial purpose, and as such would include e-commerce platforms as well. So now if we get into a little bit of the technical terms, a product seller who is not a product manufacturer shall be held liable in a product action if he A has exercised substantial control over the designing, testing, manufacturing, packaging, or labeling of a product that caused harm, or B, he has altered or modified the product and such alteration or modification was the substantial factor in causing the harm. That means the seller has changed the product and the change was responsible for causing harm to the consumer. And C, he has made an express warranty of a product independent of any express warranty made by the manufacturer himself. And the product failed to conform to this warranty. So out of these 3, which do you think applies to the case of Amazon and the MI watch?
Last one.
Yes,
The last
it
one.
is. And do you think that this is quote unquote fair or correct?
I would, from my point of view, if I was a buyer and I was cheated, I'm going to sue the seller and Amazon because Amazon guaranteed it.
Exactly. So as consumers, we have the right to, get some sort of compensation for being cheated out, as you have said, right? So Amazon themselves had, this is a hypothetical situation here, please. So Amazon themselves have guaranteed or made an express warranty of the product, and the product failed to live up to the standard, which means Amazon did not exercise proper caution while giving their warranty for stuff like this. So they should be held liable. Section 86C would be applicable over here. Product seller who is not a product manufacturer shall be held liable if B, the product has been sold by him and the identity of the product is not manufacturer of such product is not known, and if he failed to exercise reasonable care in assembling, inspecting, or maintaining such a product. So while these 2 clauses do exist, they will not be applicable to the example previously. Now the next part. Disclosing personal information. This is an extremely important thing that everybody should know, I feel. So now let's take another hypothetical example. A woman has recently insured a small house with the money she's earned over the years, and she has not revealed this fact to her husband of the insurance. Her husband sees a visiting card from the insurance company and he goes to the insurance company and he inquires there. He asks the manager with the wife's name and asks if she's the client there. The manager nicely pulls up her records and gives him the complete details of the entire transaction and the insurance. What do you think is the issue here? Okay, from the point of view of the manager, do you think this is correct? So I'm pretty sure all of us agree that that was not the way to go and that was not proper protocol. So under the second section 47, under section 247, unfair trade practice means a trade practice which for the purpose of promoting the sale or the sale of any of the goods adopts any unfair method or unfair or deceptive practice, including the following practices. So not issuing the bill, refusing after the sale of goods to take back or withdraw the defective goods, and disclosing to another person any personal information given in confidence by the consumer, unless such disclosure has been made in accordance with the provisions of any law. So under this, and looking at the previous example, we all can agree on the fact that the ninth subsection would be applicable to this. So disclosing any personal information without proper justification by the law is considered an unfair trade practice, and you will be, applicable to get some sort of, or to take some sort of action against this. Additionally, the IRDAI, or the for the protection of policyholders' interests, insurers are required to maintain total confidentiality of policyholder information unless it is legally necessary to disclose the same to statutory authorities. So statutory authorities, again, is a quite common defense that can be used for these. And otherwise, without any proper justification or consent, you cannot be your information cannot be disclosed, and if it is disclosed, you are applicable to take some sort of action.
Okay, so now we're going to be going into, now that we've covered basically the 4 aspects of consumer protection. Now let's say that this kind of a thing happens with you. So you will probably have to file a complaint in front of a consumer forum. So in India, we do have separate consumer forums that are apart from the regular, let's say, district court, high court, or Supreme Court, that just deal with these consumer affairs and these consumer disputes, and we'll be explaining each of them in detail. But for now, we want to ask you guys this question: that why do you think that it is so important that we have a separate mechanism to talk about consumer disputes specifically? Basically, the reason why this entire separate mechanism has been set up is, you all must know that in India, to try a case, it takes a long time, right? There's a huge backlog of cases, and because of that reason, one case will take years and years to settle. So obviously this is an issue because, yeah, like ma'am said, the courts are overloaded. That's very true. Already the courts have such a huge burden on them with a lot of cases. Now, if this is also added to the regular courts, then it'll take a long time. And that's also a wrong thing for 2 reasons. First of all, it's very inconvenient for a consumer to keep going to the court and to have this sitting on their head for so long. In fact, there might be a deterrent. Like, some people might not file claims even if their rights have been violated, just thinking that, it's going to take 5 years to settle. It's not worth all the pain and the stress of it all the time. So that's one reason, because people won't even bother approaching the court because it'll take so much time. Second reason is, when it takes so much time, it also costs a lot of money. To get to these consumer courts, you will need lawyers. Even though to file a complaint, you do not need a lawyer. We will talk to you guys about that later. But when it's, supposing if you're talking in front of the national high courts or something like that, national Supreme Court or state high court, then you will need lawyers to represent you, and their fees can be quite expensive, and especially if it goes on for a long time. So that's why we have separate forums, and we'll be now going on and explaining what these forums are. So before we go ahead, we need to explain what jurisdiction is. So jurisdiction is basically a court's power to hear a certain case. So for example, if a crime takes place in the US, India's Supreme Court cannot hear that case because it does not have jurisdiction. It doesn't have the power over what happens on US soil. So like that, there are 2 different types of jurisdiction: pecuniary and territorial. What I just explained to you regarding if something takes place on the US borders, India cannot try it. That is territorial jurisdiction, because the Indian Supreme Court does not have territorial jurisdiction, does not have jurisdiction over that territory of the United States. But it doesn't have to take place only in terms of nations or continents. It can take place even in something as simple as small as a district. So something takes place in a district, it will only be that district forum that looks at it. So as you can see, we have the District Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission, we have the State Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission, and the National Commission as well. So if something takes place in your district, then you will go to the District Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission. So you can go to your district commission, where if you have purchased the good in that district, or if you are from that district. So there are 2 options available. If you, supposing I've gone to another district and I've bought a good, then there I can either file it there in that district, or I can file it in my own district, because I am from this district, even if I bought the consumer a good at that area. Then there's also pecuniary jurisdiction. Pecuniary basically means monetary, having to deal with money. So basically the courts also have specific quotas of money that they can handle. For example, the District Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission can only hear complaints where the value of the total goods and services don't exceed 1 crore. Then the state can talk about, hear cases which are less than 10 crores. And finally, the National Consumer Court can hear any case that is for the value above 10 crores. So this is also their jurisdiction over certain amounts of value in terms of money. There's also appellate jurisdiction, which is basically saying that if you get a district, then you can, if you go to the district court, you can appeal to the state court, and then from state court, you can appeal to the national court. So that's also another kind of jurisdiction that exists in law and here as well. So I hope you all understood these important terms. I also want to point out that the consumer doesn't necessarily include just an individual person. It can include an association, a business, an NGO, and even class action lawsuits involving multiple consumers with whom the same thing has happened. When we come to the disposal of cases in these consumer courts, it's usually within 3 months. But if the case involves testing or analysis, for instance, when it comes to food products, then it will happen usually within 5 months. Now we're going to be talking to you guys how to file an actual consumer grievance redressal form if something happens with you. So there's a website, consumerhelpline.gov.in, where you can go, and they have a couple of options there. First, you can call to register your grievance at the toll-free number that's been given. You can also SMS them what your grievance is, and they will get back to you. But we're going to kind of walk you through how to register online through the form that they've given. So when you click that button, you come to the screen where you'll have to put in your name, your gender, your contact number, and your email ID. After which you will get an OTP from your phone number, your email. And once you do get that OTP and once you verify it, you can be able to log into your account. So the OTP will be sent to your phone number. And once you get the OTP, you plug it in, you'll be able to log into your account with the password that you've created. So once you have created your account, then you can create a form and you can write down your grievance in the form. So you have to write down your grievance type, the state, the city in which you purchased the object of the good or the service, the industry, the category, the company, the nature of the grievance, and the product value. Once you're done, you will be able to also attach photos. So this photo can be, for example, if I've ordered a defective product, I can take pictures of the defects so that they know that there is proof of that. And you can also upload proof of purchase. So like a bill or a receipt that's been issued by the seller. Once you're done, or once you've submitted this form, you can also see your grievance history. So you can see the status of everything that you have already filed and like what action has been taken, if that action has been taken already. It's really important to note that you do not need a lawyer to fill this form. You can fill it in completely by yourself. Let's say, you are, you've bought a good or a service that you're enjoying with other people as well. Like, let's say you've brought a loaf of bread and your entire family's eaten it. Every single member of your family, if that product turns out to be defective, not every single member needs to file a complaint. One person can do that, and that's fine. But you need to note that if you are, let's say Khushi has bought a product and it's defective and I want to fill the form for her, I cannot put my name on the form saying that I, Tarasha Gupta, am filing it on behalf of Khushi Vinod. I'll have to put her name on the form saying Khushi Vinod is filing this form, but I can of course help her filing that form. So in previous sessions, we've noted that people had some questions regarding, once you submit the grievance, what happens? So according to this this is the proper website from the government, and this is listed in their FAQs as well. There are many other FAQs there which you can check out if you have any doubts, or you can ask us as well. So what happens to the grievance once you submit this form? They will, first of all, they will give you a unique ID, and they will then send this grievance to the concerned company, agency, regulator, ombudsman, etc. And they will ask them to take action. And whatever action that ends up being taken, that will be updated. Like I mentioned before, there'll be a grievance history part of your account. You go there and you can see what action is being taken. If after that, you are not satisfied with what action has been taken, or you feel that the action does not necessarily resolve your grievance, then you can go and take it up with an appropriate consumer court. So for that, you will need a lawyer, but to file a complaint in this helpline, you will not need a lawyer. Also, now this is apart from, this is off the top of my head, if you don't want to go through a government system, usually at the back of products, they have a toll-free number or an email ID where you can contact the company itself. If it's an online transaction, you can file it in the district that you are residing in. Yeah. Or you can, like, if you want to if you got it delivered somewhere else, then you can file it in there as well. So basically wherever you are staying in terms of online, because it does involve like travel from another state to probably your state. So your registering a grievance does not guarantee a remedy, but they will try to do their best to get action taken up from the company. And if not, you can file a complaint to the court. So now it's time for a quiz. We hope you guys have paid attention, because now it's time to test your knowledge. But before we go ahead with the quiz, are there any questions for us?
Not really. Go ahead.
Okay, so now we're going to do a quiz. So I'll just share my screen for the quiz. All right. So I hope you guys are all on the website. You will get a pin to input. So this is the pin. Who is a consumer? Consumer is a person who. Right. So the answer is anybody who buys or hires goods or services for a consideration. And like we mentioned before, consideration is money. Here the hypothetical question is, a popular car manufacturer began advertising their new clean diesel vehicle models, but later it was revealed that these emission test results had been manipulated for the past 7 years. These models were purchased or leased by consumers with the belief that they were environmentally friendly. What claim under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019 can be raised by these consumers who bought the model thinking it would be environmentally friendly? That's completely correct. So consumer 2 is in the lead. Now we're giving another hypothetical question. So let's say you order a sofa from an e-commerce retailer after measuring the size of your house and cross-referencing it with the size listed on the platform. However, once the sofa arrives, you notice it is much bigger than the size listed on the platform. Under which concept of consumer protection law would this case fall under? Yes, that's completely correct. I'm glad everybody got it correct. They are falsely describing a product. They're saying that it would fit in this, but it's not actually. Okay, wow, consumer 2 is really doing well. Consumer 1, you need to start answering some more questions. This is another hypothetical question. So let's say you order a pack of pens manufactured by the company Blair from an e-commerce website called Flipdeal. Now this package has been marked as fulfilled by Flipdeal, Flipdeal's choice, 100% purchase protection. So, but when the pens arrive, you notice that the ink is dried up, it's not running smoothly, and a few pens are even broken. For these defects, who would be liable? That's completely correct. Both Blair and Flipdeal will be held liable. Let's say you buy a soft drink after reading the label and ensuring that there is no caffeine in it, but you drink half the bottle and then you wake up and you try to go to sleep and you can't fall asleep. So the next morning you send the remaining half for testing and you see that actually the drink did have caffeine in it. So now here, what is the issue? That's completely correct. Deliberately concealing information, they're concealing the fact that it has caffeine in it. In fact, there are laws in India where if the caffeine goes over a certain amount, you need to mark it on the bottle. So, I mean, naturally occurring caffeine in normal materials or normal ingredients is fine, but when you add more and when it crosses a certain level, you need to label that it contains caffeine on it. So consumer 2 is in the lead, but come on, we have like 2 more questions. So consumer 3 can still catch up. If a consumer grievance case involves testing or analysis, within how much time will the case be disposed of? That's completely correct. It is 5 months. It is 3 months if the case does not involve testing or analysis. This is a simple question. Do you need a lawyer to file a complaint in the consumer grievance redressal form?
I think we've got two answers.
That's correct. No, you don't need a lawyer. You can do it all by yourself. Congratulations.
Yeah, I will be sharing a link for a feedback form over here. Please do fill it when you have time. It's very short. This will help us out to hold better webinars in the future.
Thanks a lot for attending, guys, and for participating. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can just ask us now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.